What would you do if, instead of treating you like a grieving widow, your own family treated you like enemies? Today's story is about Jessica. After losing her husband in a tragic accident, her life collapsed. But what happened next was even worse. Her mother-in-law and sister-in-law took her newborn baby and forced her out of her own husband's house. Broken and alone, they thought she was finished. They were wrong. A mother's love is powerful. Jessica came back strong. She took her child back and gave them a punishment they will never forget. But don't take my word for it. Now hear this story in her voice, from her perspective. My name is Jessica, and at 28 I've learned a truth most people don't discover until they're 80. The people who share your table are often the same ones waiting for you to trip so they can take your seat. I've spent my entire adult life as a pediatric nurse. I've seen the rawest parts of humanity, parents grieving, children fighting for their lives, and the quiet, unbreakable bonds of family. I believed in those bonds. I believed that if you poured love, money, and care into a home, it would become a fortress. I never imagined that while I was helping others heal, my own family was treating my womb like a commercial investment, tracking my pregnancy like a stock market ticker. When I married Liam, I thought I'd hit the lottery. He wasn't just handsome, he was a brilliant software architect with a heart that was almost too big for his chest. We bought a beautiful 5-bedroom estate in the suburbs of Seattle, a place with big windows and a backyard that Liam promised would one day be filled with swing sets and soccer balls. But our home was never just ours. Because Liam's sister, Sarah, had a husband named David who was constantly stationed on oil rigs in Dubai, my mother-in-law, Martha, insisted that Sarah live with us. Martha's logic was simple. Family stays together. I was a nurse making $75,000 a year, and Liam was making double that. We had the space, and I had the heart, so I said yes. I spent 3 years being the peacekeeper. I worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital, came home, and still found the energy to cook for Sarah and Martha. I paid for the luxury groceries, the organic produce, and the expensive wines Sarah liked because she was stressed. I sat on the sofa for countless nights holding Sarah's hand while she cried about her infertility. I felt for her, truly. I felt so much for her that when her 4th round of IVF wasn't covered by insurance, I took $12,000 out of my personal savings to cover it. I thought I was being a sister. I didn't realize I was just funding the resentment of a woman who hated me for having the very life she felt entitled to. Life in that Seattle house wasn't just crowded. It was expensive. But I didn't mind, or at least I told myself I didn't. I was the provider in ways that went far beyond my paycheck. While Liam was buried in code and architecture, I was the one managing the household's emotional debt. I remember one specific Tuesday. I had just come off a grueling night shift in the NICU. I was exhausted, my feet were swollen, and all I wanted was 5 hours of sleep. Instead, I walked in to find Martha and Sarah sitting at the kitchen island, surrounded by travel brochures for a spa retreat in Arizona. "Jessica, honey," Martha said, not even looking up to see the dark circles under my eyes. "Sarah is just so depressed after this last round of treatments. We think this trip is what she needs to clear her head. It's only $3,000. I looked at Sarah. She was scrolling through her phone, not a hint of a tear in sight, just a cold, expectant silence. I sighed, pulled out my checkbook, and wrote the check. I didn't do it because I had money to burn. I did it because I wanted the house to be peaceful. I wanted Liam to come home to a happy sister and a calm mother. I was literally buying their affection, one emergency expense at a time. Sarah's husband, David, was practically a ghost. He sent money home, sure, but it went straight into Sarah's personal fund for designer handbags and shoes. She didn't contribute a cent to the mortgage, the utilities, or the property taxes. I was the one paying for the high-end steak dinners and the premium cable packages they insisted on. One evening, I overheard them in the garden. I was leaning against the window, about to call them in for dinner. Martha was stroking Sarah's hair. "Don't worry, darling," Martha whispered. Everything Jessica has belongs to this family. She's just the caretaker. One day, you'll have everything you deserve." At the time, I thought she meant Sarah would find her own happiness. I didn't realize everything Sarah deserved included the very child growing inside me. I was the golden goose, and they were just waiting for the right moment to sharpen the knife. The atmosphere in the house shifted the second we came home from the 20-week anatomy scan. Liam and I were beaming, holding the black and white thermal photos of our son. When we announced, "It's a boy," I expected cheers. Instead, a heavy, suffocating silence filled the living room. Sarah didn't congratulate me. She stood up and walked out, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Martha followed her, but not before giving me a look that made my blood run cold. It wasn't the look of a grandmother. It was the look of a predator seeing a prize she finally knew the value of. 3 days later, my world ended. Liam was walking to his office in downtown Seattle when a distracted driver jumped the curb. He died before the ambulance even arrived. I remember the police standing in my foyer, their hats in their hands, and the sound of my own screaming, a sound so primal I didn't recognize it as mine. I thought grief would bring us together. I was wrong. My husband hadn't been in the ground for a week before the gaslighting began. I would find my car keys missing, and when I asked Martha about them, she'd tilt her head and say, "Jessica, dear, you put them in the freezer, don't you remember? The grief. It's making you so confused. We're worried about your head." I knew I hadn't put my keys in the freezer, but when you're 5 months pregnant and your heart is a jagged hole in your chest, you start to doubt your own shadow. They started whispering when I entered a room. I'd catch them looking at my stomach and then at each other. Sarah started buying baby clothes, blue ones, expensive designer ones. When I asked her why, she'd smile that cold, thin smile. "Oh, just to help out, Jess. You're in no state to shop. You can barely keep your own name straight." They began telling our neighbors in the church group that I was having episodes. Martha told my OB/GYN that I was dangerously depressed and unstable. They were building a case. They weren't mourning Liam. They were calculating the most efficient way to erase me from his legacy while keeping the only part of him that was left, my son. Every time I cried for my husband, they used it as evidence that I was losing my mind. I was a nurse. I knew the signs of a mental breakdown. I wasn't having one. I was being haunted by the living. The day I went into labor, the physical pain was nothing compared to the cold dread I felt looking at the 2 women sitting in my hospital room. I was weak, recovering from an emergency C-section that had left me trembling and exhausted. When the nurse finally brought Leo to me, my beautiful boy with Liam's nose and a shock of dark hair, I felt a surge of strength. I felt like I could finally survive this. But I didn't even get to hold him for 10 minutes. I had drifted into a heavy, post-surgical sleep. When I opened my eyes, the bassinet next to my bed was empty. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Where is he?" I rasped, my voice cracking. Sarah was standing by the window, cradling Leo. She was dressed in a high-end silk blouse, looking perfectly composed, while I lay there in a blood-stained gown. She wasn't holding him like an ant. She was rocking him with a proprietary gaze that made my skin crawl. "He's fine, Jessica," Martha said, stepping out from the shadows of the corner. She didn't come to my bedside to comfort me. She stood at the foot of the bed like a judge. "We've spoken to the hospital social worker. We told them about your episodes, the confusion, the inability to care for yourself. Sarah has already signed the temporary guardianship papers we had prepared." "What? No." I tried to sit up, but the white-hot pain from my incision sliced through me, forcing me back down. "Don't make a scene," Martha hissed, leaning over me. Her breath smelled like the peppermint tea I had bought her. "You're a widow with no job and a shattered mind. Sarah is the mother now. David is coming home from Dubai to help her raise him in Liam's house. You're leaving today." They didn't wait for a discharge. They had used their influence and my unstable reputation to convince the staff I was being moved to a private care facility. Instead, they draped a coat over my shoulders, shoved me into a wheelchair, and wheeled me to the curb. My suitcases, the ones they had packed before I even went into labor, were already in the trunk of a car. They didn't drive me to a facility. They drove me to the edge of my parents' driveway, pushed my bags out, and told me that if I ever showed my face at the estate again, they'd have me committed for good. I spent 48 hours staring at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom, the phantom weight of my son still pressing against my chest. I could feel the milk coming in, a physical ache that reminded me every second that my baby was hungry and I wasn't there. My mother sat on the edge of my bed, her eyes red from crying, but her voice was like steel. "Jessica," she whispered, "they think you're a victim because you're grieving. They think Liam's death left you powerless. Show them you're the woman Liam loved. Show them you're a mother." The haze of the anesthesia and the grief finally lifted. I realized that in their greed, Martha and Sarah had made a fatal mistake. They treated me like an outsider in my own life. I remembered Liam's obsession with security. He was a software architect, a man who lived by the code of back up and protect. I didn't call Martha to beg. I didn't text Sarah to plead. Instead, I called my father's attorney and then spent 6 hours on Liam's laptop. I triggered the dead man switch Liam had set up, a cloud-based folder that was to be shared with me if his heartbeat-synced watch ever stopped for more than 24 hours. What I found was my ammunition. Liam had recorded months of nanny cam footage from the living room for security, but it had captured Sarah and Martha discussing their plan to save the baby from me as early as my 6-month mark. Even better, I found the digital deed. 3 months before his accident, Liam had quietly moved our $1.2 million estate into a survivorship deed in my name only. He had seen his mother's greed and his sister's envy, and he had built a fortress around me without me even knowing. I wiped my eyes, looked at my father, and said, "Get the car. We're going to the sheriff's department. I'm not just taking my son back, I'm taking their sanctuary." The end came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after I had been dumped like trash on my parents' lawn. I didn't arrive with tears. I arrived with the law. 2 marked sheriff's vehicles pulled into the driveway of the estate, followed by my father's truck and a locksmith's van. Martha opened the front door, her face twisting into a sneer the moment she saw me. "I told you to stay away, Jessica. You're trespassing, you crazy—" "Actually, Martha," the sheriff interrupted, stepping forward with a clipboard, "you are." He handed her the emergency petition for writ of habeas corpus and the felony kidnapping warrant. Martha's face went from pale to ashen as she read the words. Behind her, Sarah appeared in the hallway holding Leo. She looked panicked, clutching my son like a shield. "He's mine now!" Sarah shrieked, her voice cracking with a desperation that was almost pathetic. "She's unfit. I'm the one who can give him a stable home." The officers didn't hesitate. They walked straight past Martha. One officer placed a firm hand on Sarah's shoulder, while the other gently but firmly took Leo from her arms. I stepped forward, my heart hammering against my ribs, and as the officer placed my son back into my arms, the world finally snapped back into focus. He was warm, he smelled like lavender, and he was mine. "Sarah Miller, Martha Vance," the sheriff announced. "You are under arrest for second-degree custodial interference and kidnapping." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Sarah started sobbing, begging David, who was still thousands of miles away, to help her. Martha was silent, her eyes darting toward the locksmith, who was already drilling into the front door's deadbolt. "Wait!" Martha yelled as she was being led toward the patrol car. "You can't kick us out. This is my son's house." "No, Martha," I said, my voice steady for the first time since Liam died. "Liam knew who you were. He put this house in my name to protect us from people exactly like you. You're not family. You're tenants who outstayed your welcome." I watched from the porch, holding Leo tight as they were shoved into the back of the police cruisers. I had my father help me carry their designer bags, the ones I had paid for, and I dropped them at the edge of the curb. Today, that 5-bedroom house is quiet, but it's full. My parents moved into the guest wing to help me with Leo. Martha and Sarah are currently awaiting trial. Their reputations in our community are completely destroyed, and Sarah's husband filed for divorce the moment he heard about the kidnapping charges. They lost their freedom, their status, and the roof over their heads because they tried to steal a legacy that was never theirs. Now, I wake up and look at Leo, and I see Liam in his eyes. We are home, and for the first time, we are safe. Jessica's journey shows us the incredible strength of a mother's love, but it also exposes the dark side of greed and envy. So I have to ask you, who do you think was the real mastermind behind this betrayal, Martha or Sarah? And what did you learn about protecting your own family from this story? Please keep in mind that this video was a dramatization, a fictional scenario created specifically for societal reform and to raise awareness about the legal and emotional complexities of inheritance and custody. We share these dark realities as a warning so that you can recognize these red flags and avoid repeating such destructive mistakes in your own lives. In the end, karma always finds its way home, and justice prevails for those who stand their ground. If you learned something valuable from this video, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to join us for new stories every single day.